Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. This is 6-Path Weeb, where we break down anime theories, explore the unexpected, and dive deep into the world of fanfiction. Today's topic: what if Tobirama's spirit lived in Naruko? Part 3. Things are getting intense, and the stakes are higher than ever. Disclaimer: this content is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in this video. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get into it. When the next day began, Naruko was already deep inside the well-known training cave where she had spent 3 years learning under the guidance of the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama. After leaving the barbecue restaurant the previous evening, Naruko had gone straight home to review the scroll and plan an efficient training schedule. Tobirama had detailed an extensive array of water-style techniques: long range, short range, defensive, offensive, and supportive in nature. For now, Naruko possessed a solid set of jutsu, 1 defensive technique, 3 offensive ones, and 1 supplementary technique. She smiled fondly as she recalled her early days of learning the Suru no Jutsu, water prison technique. Back then, her younger self had been impatient, wishing to learn something more exciting. In response, Tobirama had used a few water whips to playfully correct her focus and demonstrate the value of foundational skills. Admittedly, the technique had some limitations. It was most effective at close range and relied on the element of surprise. Fortunately, Tobirama had also taught her several advanced applications to maximize the effectiveness of the technique. For example, she could use a shadow clone to hide and wait for the right opportunity, while the original version of her could lead the target into the trap. After reviewing the jutsu list, Naruko selected another technique to focus on that day. She had about 3 hours before she needed to meet her team, so she planned 1 hour of water control exercises, followed by 30 minutes of jutsu training, and ending with 90 minutes of physical training that combined weapon and hand-to-hand techniques. The jutsu she chose to practice was Suten, Han-Ryu, water release, tearing torrent technique. Upon reading its description, Naruko noticed it shared similarities with one of her water manipulation drills. The technique involved gathering water into a spiraling current using the hand. Previously, she had practiced swirling existing water. Now, she needed to apply that principle while forming the water herself. She wasn't at Tobirama-sensei's level yet, so careful concentration was necessary. Kneeling calmly on the lake's surface, Naruko closed her eyes. She extended her chakra into the surrounding water, gently reaching for the moisture in the air. Slowly, the invisible water particles began to coalesce before her like suspended raindrops. Once she felt she had gathered enough, she opened her eyes and smiled. The serene view of floating droplets inside the cave always made her feel at peace, and brought memories of her mentor. With deliberate focus, she began performing the hand seals at a steady pace, sensing her chakra molding into the required form. Suten, Han-Ryu. However, unlike the scroll's ideal description, the spiral of water took longer to form and lacked the cohesion necessary for practical use. Naruko halted the technique. Tobirama-sensei had always emphasized the importance of understanding your own movements to identify mistakes. Simply repeating something wouldn't help if it was being done incorrectly. Rather than proceeding by trial and error, Naruko reflected on the attempt, identified what went wrong, and corrected it before trying again. She could have used shadow clones to help, but since she hadn't fully understood the technique yet, it wouldn't have made a difference. Reminding herself that this was only her first try at a B-rank jutsu, especially one using airborne water molecules, she gave herself grace for the difficulty. She then attempted the technique again using the water from the cave itself, and this time, the results improved. It wasn't complete yet, but the progress was evident. With her clones now able to continue refining it, Naruko shifted to her physical training routine. Of course, it would be best to master the technique using airborne moisture as her sensei did, making it more versatile in the field. But there was still time for that. After some light stretching, the newly graduated Jinan moved through the combat forms she had learned from Tobirama-sensei, blending them with styles inspired by the first Hokage, just as instructed. Few people knew of Tobirama's style, perhaps only the third Hokage and Kosuke, so blending the techniques would make her taijutsu appear unique and lessen the risk of drawing attention. She even incorporated basic academy moves to keep things modest. When she struck the cave wall and left a small mark, a new sound echoed in the distance: footsteps. 2 days ago, she might have been alarmed at someone discovering her training here. Now, the thought only left her feeling a little nostalgic. "Oh, it's you, Naruko-chan. What brings you here?" asked Kosuke, the elderly shinobi, as he approached with his warm and familiar smile. "Good morning, Kosuke-ochan. I found this cave a while back while looking for hidden waterfalls. It's peaceful here, so I come to train every day, Naruko replied cheerfully. The older man nodded in understanding, his smile never wavering. Well, Naruko-chan, you've stumbled into an important part of the village's history. This cave was once a favorite spot of our esteemed second Hokage. I remember visiting it myself around 40 years ago, when he taught me a few of his techniques. He paused when he noticed the slight crack on the wall left by Naruko's strike, an impressive result for someone fresh out of the academy. You're clearly working hard, Naruko-chan. I can see the dedication. Naruko smiled appreciatively, glad he hadn't seen her earlier suit in practice. Thanks, Ochan. I really want to become Hokage someday. Just getting some extra training in before I meet my team. Ah yes, that's right. So who is your Jonin sensei? Kosuke asked curiously. His name is Sarutobi Asuma. I don't know much about him yet, except he reminds me a bit of the third Hokage, Naruko said, returning to her shuriken practice. Tobirama had taught her that imagining real opponents during training could help develop versatility and awareness, even when alone. While it wasn't the same as sparring, it encouraged adaptability. Kosuke seemed lost in fond memories, so Naruko continued training until it was nearly time to go. She gathered her tools and walked up to him. Sorry, Kosuke-ochan, I've got to go now. The old man smiled and nodded. Good luck, Naruko-chan. And remember, always stay true to the core strength of a shinobi. Naruko blinked once, pondering the message, then smiled confidently. She understood it well, both Tobirama-sensei and the third Hokage had reminded her often. With renewed energy, she dashed toward the training grounds, where her team would be waiting. Upon arrival, she was surprised to see everyone already present. It wasn't even 8 o'clock yet, so she knew she wasn't late. She calmly approached the group, observing the training field with quiet anticipation. The area had many trees and plenty of natural cover, perfect for agility and technique drills. Asuma was speaking with Shikamaru when he looked up at her. About time you arrived, Naruko. I was beginning to wonder if something came up. Naruko offered an apologetic nod, ready to begin the new day. Forgive me, Asuma-sensei. It's just that I've developed a daily training routine, Naruko said with a sheepish smile. Both of her teammates turned to look at her in surprise. They were in the middle of being tested, and Naruko still found time to train? Plus, I actually assumed Shikamaru would be the last one to arrive, so I thought I had more time. The boy in question folded his arms and let out a sigh. My mother wouldn't stop fussing over me this morning. I left early just to get some peace. Hinata let out a gentle giggle at her teammates' banter, while Asuma smiled knowingly. He was well aware of who maintained order in the Nara household, and it certainly wasn't Shikamaru's father, Shikaku. Alright, now that everyone's here, let's get started, Asuma said, his voice calm but firm. The 3 young Genin straightened up immediately. For today's test, the 3 of you will be working together to try and land 3 successful hits on me. That's the only rule. However, he paused, letting the suspense hang for a moment. If only one of you manages to do it, it won't count. I won't explain further. That's all I'll say. The 3 students blinked in confusion, clearly wanting more details, but Asuma gave them no time to ask. You have 3 hours. The test begins. Now. Before they could react, Asuma dashed forward toward the nearest target, startling Shikamaru and Hinata. Asuma deliberately avoided using full speed, opting to hold back so they had a fair chance. Naruko's expression sharpened instantly as she initiated her strategy. Asuma aimed a kick at her, but to his surprise, her form vanished and was replaced by a wooden log. Whoa! Sensei! Came Naruko's voice from behind the trees. Asuma smirked. Good reflexes, he muttered to himself, quietly impressed. That substitution had been fast, faster than many Chunin he had trained. I never said you'd get time to prepare, nor that I wouldn't attack first, he called out to them. Still, to make it fair, you now have 10 minutes to come up with a strategy. After that, I'll be coming after you. Use your time wisely, Shikamaru, Hinata, Naruko. Shikamaru muttered his usual complaint, so troublesome. Hinata looked nervous, startled by the surprise attack, while Naruko joined them quickly, her face determined. In moments, the trio disappeared into the forest to regroup. Dash. In a secluded clearing nearby. Naruko, what just happened? That was fast. Shikamaru asked, brows furrowed. I thought you were the strategist, Shikamaru. That was just a simple substitution technique, Naruko replied with a small grin. I've practiced it a lot. It's like a reflex now. Hinata, staying focused, reminded them, we have less than 10 minutes to come up with a plan. Shikamaru nodded, pushing aside his curiosity about Naruko's improvement. The test needed their full attention. Based on Asuma's opening move, he realized none of them stood a chance solo. They had to work together. Alright, I've got an idea, he finally said. The girls nodded in agreement, listening carefully as Shikamaru outlined their approach. When the time ended, Asuma casually flicked away his cigarette and began his search for the trio. Their hiding skills were decent, he found hints of Hinata and Shikamaru's presence, but Naruko remained undetected. That alone caught his interest. Suddenly, a flurry of shurikens soared from the left. Asuma dodged expertly, his brow raising at their accuracy. He turned in time to block a swift kick from Naruko. The strength behind her strikes surprised him. Her style focused on speed and fluid motion, but there was noticeable force behind every blow. They exchanged moves for 5 minutes straight, with Naruko holding her own impressively. Her stamina was remarkable, especially for someone her age. As Asuma tried to counter, more shuriken and kunai came at him from different angles. Naruko saw her chance, drew a short blade, and advanced. Asuma evaded again, but this time, a shadow technique from Shikamaru crept toward him. He used a quick movement technique to escape, but was suddenly forced to block a surprise shuriken from Naruko, which grazed his arm. He blinked, surprised at the accuracy, and at how close Hinata's gentle strike had come to landing. The three genin had coordinated well, far better than he had expected. These three are full of surprises, Asuma thought with a grin. They've got spirit, and potential. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the village. In a serene area surrounded by ancient trees, the veteran ninja Kosuke was quietly preparing lunch. The forest here held a special history. These trees, he reflected, had been a gift from the first Hokage to his wife, and each one still carried a trace of his energy. Few knew the history, but Kosuke always felt a sense of honor being here. As he stirred his stew, he didn't need to look up to know the third Hokage was approaching. Fancy seeing you here, Kosuke, Hiruzen greeted warmly, sitting on a nearby rock. Sandaime-sama, always a pleasure. Would you like a bowl? I made extra. Hiruzen accepted with a thankful nod. Kosuke was not only a seasoned shinobi but an excellent cook. They sat together, eating in comfortable silence, reminiscing about the past. Once the meal was done, Kosuke cleaned the dishes and returned to sit across from the Hokage. I take it you've spoken with young Naruko-chan lately, Hiruzen said with a knowing smile. Kosuke chuckled. Indeed, we've had a few wonderful chats. She's curious about the past, about the previous Hokage, and even about old missions you and I went on. Her eyes light up when she listens. Hiruzen nodded thoughtfully. It seems your stories inspired her greatly. She's been training hard. Some of the instructors say her growth has been remarkable. Oh? Kosuke raised a brow. Apparently, she sometimes holds back, missing a few shuriken throws on purpose. But during her genin exam, she surprised everyone by exceeding expectations. Her teacher confirmed she hadn't practiced recently either. Kosuke considered this. Naruko had always struck him as clever, perhaps more than most gave her credit for. Sounds like she's more capable than she lets on, he said with a small smile. Hiruzen gave a thoughtful nod. What do you think, Kosuke? Could she be hiding her full potential? Well, it might sound a little old-fashioned, the elder man said with a slight chuckle, but I think Naruko's intentions are similar to how we used to be, Hiruzen. If she showed everything she could do, everyone would know about it. Maybe she's just not ready to share all her talents yet. Who's to say, really? It's a bit exciting, don't you think? She might be practicing elemental ninjutsu. Or maybe even trying her hand at genjutsu. Quite a mystery, this Uzumaki Naruko. Just like her father. Hiruzen furrowed his brow slightly at the thought of Naruko keeping things to herself, but a soft smile appeared as he recalled the days when Minato Namikaze had started unveiling his techniques, first the Rasengan, and later the Hiraishin. He remembered the pride he had felt watching his student rise to become a legend during challenging times. Things were different back then, Hiruzen murmured, but I suppose I can't blame young Naruko if she is indeed holding back a little. Kosuke smiled as he gazed at the sky. I believe she's currently taking her test with her sensei, isn't she? Hiruzen gave a thoughtful nod. If Naruko was hiding her abilities during her time at the academy, then today's test might just reveal more than expected. With Naruko . The evaluation was progressing well. Team 10 displayed excellent teamwork in their attempt to land a second strike on their instructor, the bearded Jounin. After their initial hit, the sensei had picked up the pace, moving more swiftly. But Shikamaru and Hinata were more prepared this time. Their strategy stayed consistent. Shikamaru handled long-range tactics while Hinata and Naruko engaged up close. Hinata did her best, but keeping up with a Jounin-level opponent was a tall task. Naruko often had to support her, focusing more on creating opportunities rather than launching full-on attacks. She recalled what Kosuke had advised before the test: sometimes teamwork meant protecting others, not just pursuing objectives. Though she was tempted to go on the offensive, she remembered the teachings of the second Hokage and adjusted her strategy accordingly. She began evaluating her options, techniques she could safely use without drawing too much attention. Besides the basics, she could rely on taijutsu and... yes, that could work. Asuma noticed shadows approaching and evaded, along with Naruko's shuriken. He then turned his attention to Hinata's precise yet gentle strikes, parrying them calmly. The three of them showed good coordination and promising individual abilities. After gently pushing Hinata back, he was surprised to see two Narukos charging at him. Expecting an illusion, he remained still, and sure enough, the copies passed right through him, simple clones. Then came the unexpected. The real Naruko had maneuvered behind him, quietly and quickly. She held a ninjato with focused intent, aiming for a clean strike. Asuma reacted just in time, intercepting with one of his trench knives. The clashing metal echoed across the clearing. Locked in the brief clash, Asuma noted her solid stance. Just then, he had to dodge a set of shuriken flying from behind. With no time to waste, he replaced himself with a nearby log using substitution. That was close. How troublesome, Shikamaru muttered from a bush. Naruko chuckled at his familiar phrase. No need to worry, Shikamaru, Asuma called out, reappearing from the foliage. I'll count that as 2 successful hits. You've all passed. He motioned for them to gather. Shikamaru looked relieved, probably thinking about how his mother would react. Hinata beamed with joy, and Asuma reminded himself to speak with her father about continuing as her mentor. The Hyuga clan had its complexities, after all. Then there was Naruko. Her expression remained steady, not overly excited or relieved, but focused, determined. Asuma was intrigued by the blonde kunoichi. All right, he began, you're now officially members of Team 10. Great teamwork today. Even your individual abilities show promise, impressive for fresh academy graduates. For now, we'll start with a simple schedule, daily training here at the same time. I noticed areas where each of you can improve, and that's where we'll begin. After training, we'll move on to missions, probably 2 per day to ease you into things. All 3 Genin nodded. All right, you're dismissed for today. Naruko, could you stay for a moment? Naruko waved goodbye to a smiling Hinata and a mildly annoyed Shikamaru. The Nara heir couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Naruko than met the eye. Perhaps he'd ask his father about it later. Now alone with Naruko, Asuma spoke gently. Naruko, I asked you to stay because, unlike Shikamaru and Hinata, you don't have a clan to train with after hours. He noticed her look drop slightly. Ah, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. What I meant is, they'll get additional help from their families. I'll be focusing more on your individual development. If you have questions, never hesitate to ask me, alright? Naruko nodded with a warm smile. Okay, Asuma-sensei. I understand. Also, he added, from what I saw today, I take it you didn't show this side of yourself at the academy? Naruko scratched the back of her head sheepishly. You're not wrong, she admitted. Asuma had only seen her taijutsu, kenjutsu, and shuriken techniques, no advanced ninjutsu or anything else. Asuma gave her a reassuring smile. It's actually a smart move. In a real situation, holding back certain abilities can work to your advantage, so long as it's not dangerous to do so. That said, are you still keeping some things hidden? Naruko thought about how the second Hokage had taught her to discern people fishing for information. She knew how to give just enough. I practiced a lot during the academy. I struggled with chakra control for a while, so I spent extra time learning techniques that would help. I found a scroll at the library with exercises, tree walking and water walking. I practiced them daily. Asuma paused to think if those materials were normally accessible to students. He couldn't recall. That's impressive, he said. Chakra control will definitely help as we move into more advanced techniques, especially with genjutsu. We'll focus for now on enhancing your taijutsu and kenjutsu. What you've shown already is strong, but there's always room to improve. We'll also include sparring, between your teammates, myself, and potentially others later. Sounds great, Asuma-sensei. I'm really excited for our missions. Asuma smirked knowingly. That enthusiasm might fade after their first few low-ranking missions. After parting ways, he disappeared in a flash toward the Hokage's office to report his team's results. Naruko remained for a few moments longer, her thoughts already on her next challenge. She decided it was time to start learning her first genjutsu technique. So far, she had only trained in recognizing and neutralizing illusions. The second Hokage had taught her how to disrupt chakra flow and escape illusions, but she had yet to practice casting them. That would change starting today. Dash. At the Hokage's office . All the Jounin sensei had submitted their reports. As was typical, only a few teams had passed, Team 7, 8, and 10. The others had either not met the standards or weren't ready to move forward. The only unusual detail was that one of the teams had been approved by someone who many assumed would never pass any team. Kakashi Hatake, a former Anbu, had failed several previous teams for the same reason, lack of teamwork. But this time, he had approved his students. Asuma, now sipping tea with his father, pondered the shift. Chakra control, you say? The Hokage asked. Asuma nodded, his eyes bright with curiosity. Asuma nodded as his father, the Hokage, repeated what he had said about one Uzumaki Naruko and how much better she had performed than what she led on at the academy. About her challenge with chakra control. I'd say it was clever that she thought about it, but to me, it seems a bit too convenient, Asuma said thoughtfully. Hiruzen nodded, deep in contemplation. My thoughts exactly. An improvement in chakra control would certainly allow her to be more efficient in battle, but no academy student usually thinks that far ahead on their own. And she said she found a scroll in the library with chakra control exercises, he added. Asuma nodded in confirmation. The quiet between them gave the experienced Hokage a moment to reflect. For some reason, Naruko had been hiding her full capabilities. That, in itself, raised a significant question: why? From what Hiruzen remembered, Naruko had always been full of energy and rarely kept things to herself, especially around him. She had begun to change around the same time her grades at the academy improved, meaning that something, or perhaps someone, had influenced her back then. As great as her improvement was, the mere fact that Naruko, of all students, had chosen to focus on chakra control was surprising. It was the kind of discipline one expected from a chunin, not a student. That suggested someone may have guided her. You're zoning out, old man. What are you thinking about? Asuma asked, slightly amused. Hiruzen blinked once, then looked at his son. I'm considering the possibility that Naruko has been receiving training from someone, and that it started 3 years ago. Asuma frowned. While it wasn't forbidden for a village shinobi to offer occasional tips or training to an academy student, it was unusual for someone to do so without informing the Hokage, especially considering Naruko's unique situation. Because of the special responsibilities she carried, any type of training should be done with awareness and oversight. The Hokage had a duty to ensure that everything was handled responsibly. Do you have anyone in mind? Asuma asked. Hiruzen shook his head. I know Kosuke occasionally speaks with Naruko, but he would never begin training her without letting me know first. Asuma knew of the man, famously known as the Eternal Genin. His skills were on par with a seasoned Jounin, and the only reason he remained a Genin was due to a long-past mission under the Nidaime Hokage. It was entirely possible he offered Naruko helpful tips. Well, he might have taught her about chakra control, so that would support her story, Asuma offered, earning a thoughtful nod from Hiruzen. Perhaps. But I still believe Naruko is holding back. I can't make decisions solely based on instinct. But right now, that's all I have. What do you want me to do, then? Asuma asked carefully. As a Jounin, he knew his father's decisions could shape the village. If Hiruzen considered Naruko a potential concern, he might be asked to monitor her closely. For now, just keep your eyes open. Her teammates will likely be trained by their clans, so you can dedicate more time to her training. Asuma nodded. He had already mentioned this to Naruko. Depending on what I choose to teach her, she might already know it. But if she's trying to hide her skills, she'll act as if she doesn't. Still, it won't be long before she reveals something. Asuma raised an eyebrow. You really think an academy student, even a fresh Genin, could already understand something like elemental ninjutsu? Hiruzen chuckled lightly. From what you've told me, she's shown talent in hand-to-hand combat, sword techniques, and weapon accuracy. She's also claimed to have mastered both tree walking and water walking, chakra control methods that take months to learn. If she were a more experienced Shin'an, I would say teaching her elemental ninjutsu would be appropriate. He leaned back in his chair. If she is being trained by someone, it's hard to believe they would focus solely on chakra control without introducing ninjutsu. Asuma found himself agreeing. With Naruko's chakra reserves and refined control, she could become an expert in ninjutsu very quickly. I understand, father. I'll watch her closely. But what's your biggest concern in all this? Hiruzen paused. That whoever is training her doesn't want me to know. And I can think of only one person in Konoha who tends to operate behind my back. Asuma stiffened slightly as a single name came to mind. Shimura Dansu. Meanwhile, with Naruko. Unaware that she had become the center of such serious discussion, Naruko returned to her apartment with a quiet smile. She was ready to eat dinner and then dive back into the scroll passed down by the Nidaime Hokage. A small part of her wondered if telling her sensei anything, about her real training would be a smart move. Naruko had learned from someone incredibly skilled, someone who had once led the entire village. But it would be unwise to assume she could completely fool a trained jounin without raising questions. She knew she needed to offer a believable explanation. Chakra control, as explained by Lord Tobirama, made the most sense to share for now. She kept a third chakra control exercise a secret, a trump card, in case her sensei questioned her progress again. Sitting down with a warm bowl of ramen, Naruko unrolled the scroll in front of her and focused on the first technique listed. Meigen, Kokoni Arazu no Jutsu, illusionary technique, false surroundings. According to the scroll, it was a basic genjutsu designed to confuse opponents by altering their perception of their surroundings. It wasn't particularly useful in open battlefields, but in more confined areas, it could prove quite effective. After about 15 minutes of reading, Naruko smiled softly. The feeling of nostalgia crept in, it always did whenever she read from the Nidaime scroll. She could almost hear his voice explaining every word, every scenario, with the calm firmness of a true leader and teacher. Tobirama had always been thorough, making sure she understood the reasoning behind each move. The scroll carried that same tone, as if the Hokage himself were still guiding her. Naruko missed those days. Though she didn't miss his intense water techniques used in practice sessions, she appreciated every lesson. With renewed focus, Naruko turned her attention back to the scroll. In her heart, she had made a promise, to master every single technique and honor the legacy of the one who had believed in her from the start. With Shikamaru. Nara Shikamaru returned home shortly after completing the team assignment test, his expression filled with deep contemplation. As he stepped through the door, he found both his parents engaged in conversation in the kitchen. Yoshino was about to greet him when she caught sight of the thoughtful look on her son's face. Shikaku, Shikamaru's father, recognized that look, one of serious reflection. He had only seen it once before. Shikamaru had always been an exceptional thinker, most of the academy's material rarely challenged him. That expression meant something had truly captured his attention. Shikaku had a strong hunch about the cause. Shikamaru had just come back from the team test led by Asuma sensei, and it was unlikely that he had failed. Whatever was troubling his son wasn't failure, it was something more complex. So, how did the test go? Yoshino asked gently. Shikamaru looked up from his thoughts, noting their attention on him. It was the most puzzling experience I've had so far, that's for sure. Shikaku raised an eyebrow, silently encouraging his son to elaborate. Shikamaru explained everything, from his time at the academy to the events of the exam. His parents listened carefully, surprised by how much he was speaking. It was rare for Shikamaru to talk at length about anything. He usually preferred to avoid lengthy conversations, considering them too much effort. Despite their surprise, both parents could now understand what was bothering their son. Shikaku, however, already suspected the answer, and to him, it was fairly clear. So clear, in fact, that he wondered why it was troubling Shikamaru so much. From what you're telling me, I'd say Naruko did exactly what you used to do back at the academy, Shikaku said thoughtfully. Shikamaru blinked, clearly surprised. You mean? She was only doing just enough to pass? Shikamaru had always taken a minimal effort approach to his studies. He did only what was necessary to maintain an average standing, conserving his energy for more interesting pursuits. Naruko, however, was different. While Shikamaru was laid back and avoided effort, Naruko was full of energy and determination. That's what made the comparison so strange. But why would she do that? Shikamaru asked, puzzled. Shikaku took a sip of his tea before answering, his expression unreadable. As a senior member of the Nara clan, he often attended council sessions where the topic of the village's Jinchuriki came up. While their clan remained neutral on such matters, he had often witnessed two contrasting viewpoints, those of the Hokage and of Councillor Danzo Shimura. Danzo regularly criticized Naruko's training, insisting she should be placed under his supervision to be molded into a proper shinobi for the village. The Hokage, however, firmly rejected this, believing in Naruko's right to grow and train under guidance that respected her individuality. These debates eventually quieted down, especially after Naruko's grades improved and became a matter of record. Danzo's requests grew less frequent, and it had been several months since the topic was last raised. Perhaps, Shikaku mused, she believed it was better not to show everything at once. Some of the most talented shinobi in our history have done the same. Hatake Kakashi and Uchiha Itachi come to mind. Shikamaru recognized both names. Kakashi was one of the elite instructors, and Itachi, although surrounded by mystery, had been known as a prodigy. For his father to place Naruko in the same category as them only deepened Shikamaru's curiosity and made Naruko seem even more intriguing. Well, whatever it is, I've had enough thinking for one day. I'm going to get some rest, Shikamaru said with a sigh. Tomorrow, his journey as a shinobi would officially begin, and he had a strong feeling it was going to be anything but simple. What he didn't know yet was that the early days of being a ninja often involved a lot of D-rank missions, and those, too, came with their own kind of surprises. It was already quite late at night when one Uzumaki Naruko quietly opened the door to her apartment, finally letting herself exhale and relax after a long, exhausting day. She flicked on the lights, and it became evident that she had been through quite the workout. Her movements were slow, and a slight wince escaped with each step. Bruises marked her arms and legs, but she wasn't too worried. Thanks to her naturally enhanced recovery abilities, granted by the nine-tailed spirit within her, she knew a good rest would do wonders. All she wanted right now was to collapse into bed and let her body heal. The day had started just like any other during the past month, following her team's successful completion of Asuma-sensei's Jinan test. Each morning, Team 10 would gather at Training Ground 10. Naruko made it a habit to wake up a few hours earlier so she could squeeze in some solo training, mostly focused on chakra control, ninjutsu, and genjutsu. She reserved her physical training for the team exercises, where she could spar against her teammates or even Asuma-sensei. It was much more effective than constantly training with clones. After a few warm-up spars, Asuma-sensei would usually lead the team to the Hokage's office to receive a D-ranked mission. When Naruko first learned what these missions entailed, she was a bit surprised. In her imagination, she pictured how the legendary second Hokage might have reacted to such tasks. During times of conflict, missions were far more intense. Back then, even the most basic missions involved more responsibility. But in times of peace, D-ranked missions, what Naruko liked to call chores, were part of daily life. Team 10 was now completing 2 of these tasks a day. That, too, was largely due to Naruko's enthusiasm. Shikamaru would have been happy doing the bare minimum, but Naruko convinced the Hokage to allow her to take on a third D-ranked mission by herself, with Asuma-sensei's approval. She explained that it would help support her living expenses now that she was fully responsible for herself. One of those solo missions had led to the sore muscles and bruises she was now nursing. A local resident had requested a friendly sparring match with a Jinan, and the Hokage saw no harm in allowing Naruko to participate, especially given her skills in hand-to-hand combat. What wasn't mentioned, however, was that the civilian was actually a retired samurai who now focused solely on taijutsu. The match, if it could be called that, lasted nearly an hour. While the samurai had experience and strength, Naruko held her own using agility and techniques passed down by the second Hokage. In the end, her opponent praised her talent and promised to speak highly of her to the Hokage. The experience had been valuable, but her muscles certainly felt the toll. "Wow. I think that man was made of stone," Naruko murmured with a tired smile as she sank onto her bed. "Maybe I can sleep in tomorrow." And with that, she quickly drifted off into a deep sleep. The next morning, sunlight gently filtered into her room, warming Naruko's face as she slowly opened her eyes. Normally, she was up before sunrise, ready for the day. But today was different. It was the first time since meeting the second Hokage that she had actually overslept. The soreness from the previous day had dulled into a faint stiffness, manageable enough for her to begin her morning routine at a relaxed pace. Her team wasn't scheduled to meet for another 2 hours, so she had some time to herself. After finishing her usual routine in record time, out of habit more than need, she found herself wondering what to do next. Naruko wasn't the type to go for aimless walks or make casual visits. Her interests were simple: training and improving her shinobi skills. In her eyes, her mission and her passion were one and the same. She moved to her closet and retrieved 2 small scrolls, placing them on her kitchen table in the shape of a cross. After performing a quick set of hand signs, the scrolls activated, revealing rows of kanji. Biting her thumb lightly to activate the summoning technique, she pressed her thumb onto the scrolls, summoning a larger scroll, her treasured inheritance from the second Hokage. Opening the large scroll, she browsed through sections on taijutsu, ninjutsu, and genjutsu before turning to other areas the second Hokage had mastered: space-time techniques and fuinjutsu, sealing arts. One technique, Edo Tensei, caught her eye. But to her surprise, the scroll only detailed how to undo the technique, with no explanation of how to use it. Naruko respected the wisdom of her mentor and understood there was likely a reason for this. The brief description alone told her it was a technique best left alone. The scroll suggested she begin her study with fuinjutsu before diving into more complex space-time concepts. The second Hokage's famed teleportation technique, the Flying Thunder God, was a form of space-time ninjutsu that relied heavily on fuinjutsu symbols. Though the terms gave Naruko a bit of a headache, her mentor never expected her to master these skills overnight. In fact, he had told her she likely wouldn't fully grasp space-time ninjutsu until she reached the rank of Jonin. For now, Naruko focused on the basics: storage seals, simple defensive seals, and controlled tags. She had already improved her calligraphy through practice sessions with the second Hokage, a foundational skill for mastering sealing techniques. Currently, she didn't have enough funds to purchase new scrolls, so she planned to visit the shinobi library later to do some research on fuinjutsu theory. She closed the large scroll carefully and resealed it before leaving her apartment. Choosing to walk at a comfortable pace toward the training ground, Naruko reflected on her journey and the responsibility that came with the knowledge she now carried. The second Hokage had guided her through many steps, but now she was learning to apply that wisdom on her own. Just as her thoughts began to wander into doubts, she shook her head, recalling her mentor's stern advice: worrying about what-ifs only wastes time that could be used for growth. He had a unique way of making lessons stick, usually involving a well-placed water technique to emphasize his point. Naruko smiled at the memory and walked on, feeling just a little more ready for the day ahead. Training ground. Arriving right on time, Naruko walked confidently toward her sensei, who stood calmly with a thoughtful smile. Ever since forming Team 10, Naruko's relationship with her new mentor had gradually improved. She appreciated their training sessions, even if she couldn't yet use her full range of techniques. During their sparring, Naruko primarily used taijutsu and kenjutsu, occasionally mixing in some shuriken techniques. Her ninjutsu use, however, was restricted to the standard 3, much to her quiet frustration. Aside from the constant sparring with her sensei and teammates, bouts she typically won, Team 10 had recently started chakra control training. Asuma, ever pragmatic, handed over teaching duties to Naruko, trusting her experience to help Shikamaru and Hinata catch up. Unsurprisingly, Hinata managed the task on her third attempt, displaying the signature chakra precision of the Hyuga clan. The gentle fist technique required absolute control, and her performance reflected it. Shikamaru, on the other hand, understood the concept immediately but took 3 days to fully execute it. True to the Nara clan's reputation, his natural brilliance came through, but not his motivation. Naruko, who was diligent by nature, often found herself gently encouraging him, prompting a few laughs from both Hinata and Asuma. A few rounds of taijutsu drills followed before the team set off to the mission office for their routine D-ranked assignments. Though repetitive, Naruko didn't complain too much. They helped cover basic expenses, after all. Still, she sometimes daydreamed about more exciting missions. Today, however, their sensei had something different in mind. At the barbecue restaurant. Later that evening, Asuma gathered the team for a well-earned meal and a meaningful conversation. "Well," he began as they settled in, "it's been about 4 weeks since we started working together, and I think it's time we talk about your growth. My job isn't just to train you, it's to help you choose the kind of shinobi or kunoichi you each want to become." Asuma took a thoughtful puff of his cigarette before continuing. "You all have different talents. For instance, I chose to specialize in elemental ninjutsu and close-range combat using my trench knives. But that path was mine. I want each of you to explore your own." As their food arrived, he went on. "Hinata and Shikamaru already have clan-based techniques, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't explore other styles. Being versatile is a strength. The Hyuga clan style excels at close range, but might struggle against long-range opponents. The Nara shadow techniques are brilliant, but they're well known too. That's why variety matters. Hinata and Shikamaru nodded quietly, understanding the importance of balance. Alright, Shikamaru, Asuma said. Let's start with you. Any ideas on how you want to grow? Shikamaru sighed, scratching the back of his head. Well, my clan jutsu are versatile. People might know them, but it doesn't mean they'll guess how I use them. Still, I was thinking of adding something like genjutsu. It complements my abilities. Naruko, chewing thoughtfully on her skewer, clapped softly in approval. Genjutsu required excellent chakra control, something Shikamaru had just improved, and sharp intellect, which he certainly had. Genjutsu, huh? A smart choice, Asuma said. You could use your shadow techniques to pin opponents and follow up with illusions. Not bad at all. I can start you off with the basics and maybe connect you with someone more experienced. He smiled, already planning how to support each of them. Alright, Hinata. Your turn. Startled at first, Hinata fidgeted with her fingers before speaking softly. I was thinking of trying something with long-range potential. Maybe archery? She glanced nervously at her teammates, who both gave her reassuring nods. That seemed to ease her nerves. Archery, huh? Asuma said, genuinely impressed. With your Byakugan, you'd be remarkable at it. Good vision, precise aim. It fits you well. I'll help you get the gear you need. I bet Naruko and Shikamaru wouldn't mind helping you train. Especially if you can test your aim on a moving target, like Naruko. Naruko blinked. Wait, what? I didn't sign up to be target practice. Hinata giggled at the reaction while Asuma chuckled. Think of it as agility training, Asuma said, amused. Dodging arrows will sharpen your reflexes. And don't worry, Hinata won't aim anywhere dangerous. Naruko crossed her arms and pouted, though the smile tugging at her lips gave her away. I was starting to like you, sensei. Asuma laughed. Okay, your turn, Naruko. What do you want to focus on? Naruko had already given this a lot of thought. She glanced at her teammates before replying with a calm but determined voice. I want to find out my chakra affinity and master elemental ninjutsu. Asuma's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly impressed. That's a solid goal. Elemental ninjutsu isn't easy, but with your control and determination, you're more than capable. Sensei, how do I find out my affinity? Well, Asuma said, reaching into his vest, there's a special chakra paper that reveals your nature. Actually, I've got a few here. Want to give it a try, all of you? Hinata and Shikamaru nodded, curious. Hinata went first. She closed her eyes and focused her chakra. The paper grew damp in her hands. Water, Asuma noted with a smile. Next, Shikamaru focused. His paper burned up quickly. Fire. Makes sense, considering your temperament sometimes, Asuma chuckled. Then it was Naruko's turn. As she channeled her chakra, the paper split in half, one side becoming moist and the other crumbling slightly. Asuma blinked. Wind and water? That's quite rare. Naruko's eyes widened in surprise and joy. Hinata offered her congratulations, and Shikamaru gave her a nod of respect. You've got real talent, Naruko, Asuma said, contemplative. Most shinobi only have one natural element. Having two gives you a huge advantage. He leaned back. Alright. Shikamaru will begin genjutsu training, Hinata will explore archery, and Naruko, I'll talk to the Hokage about your elemental training. It's advanced stuff, and I need approval first. Naruko's excitement dimmed slightly. Oh. I didn't think I'd need permission. Asuma smiled. You'll be fine. Besides, I'm considered one of the top wind users in the village. If the Hokage agrees, I'll be teaching you myself. Naruko lit up again. That's amazing, sensei. Thank you. Hinata giggled at her teammates' enthusiasm, and the team enjoyed the rest of their meal with light chatter and smiles. Eventually, they parted ways, each of them walking toward their next step on the path to becoming stronger, more skilled shinobi. The Hokage's office. Asuma quietly observed his father, the third Hokage, as the older man let out a contemplative hum while enjoying his pipe. Asuma felt a mixture of curiosity and anticipation, eager to hear the Hokage's thoughts. He was genuinely excited about the idea of mentoring Naruko, but he needed the Hokage's approval first. There was also the curious matter of how Naruko had become so skilled without clear guidance or instruction. A small twitch in his brow appeared when he noticed the familiar, amused smile on his father's face. You know it really unsettles me when you take so long to respond, right? Asuma said with a slight smirk. Yes, I know. Hiruzen replied calmly. As for Naruko's situation, it's certainly rare for a shinobi to show natural affinity with both wind and water elements. I suppose it makes sense though, her abilities may well be inherited. Minato favored wind techniques, and Kushina had an affinity for water. Still, neither of them truly focused on elemental manipulation. Minato excelled in sealing techniques and space-time ninjutsu, while Kushina specialized in close combat using her chakra chains. Tell me, Asuma, what did you observe with her chakra paper? Asuma nodded, understanding the line of questioning. Chakra paper reveals one's elemental affinity, and stronger affinities cause distinct reactions in the paper. Her wind affinity is dominant, and impressively strong. The water element is also solid. Hinata's chakra paper simply moistened, but Naruko's paper was thoroughly soaked, cleanly split and drenched. Very intriguing. Hiruzen mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Naruko's future continues to shine brighter with each passing day. How did she respond when you told her? She was thrilled, Asuma answered. It seemed like she hadn't considered it before, which I found surprising, especially given the speculation that someone may be mentoring her in secret. The third Hokage nodded slowly. Perhaps it's simply her determination and focus paying off. Still, I must admit, part of me wonders if she's been keeping things from me. But I also know I need to consider every possibility. It wouldn't be right to jump to conclusions. Hiruzen paused, glancing down at the files on his desk with a reflective look. For a long time, he had worried about Naruko's performance at the academy, wishing she would apply herself more. Now that she had, and with such impressive results, he couldn't help but wonder if he had underestimated her potential. But in the end, the truth remained, Naruko had proven everyone wrong, including him. All right, Asuma. I'll approve you beginning her wind training, but keep it to theory and elemental control exercises for now. Asuma stood and gave a small nod. I take it you're no longer planning to look into her training further? There's no need, Hiruzen replied with a gentle sigh. Everything she has demonstrated aligns with what's taught in the academy, taijutsu, weapon use, and some chakra control techniques. If someone else were mentoring her, I believe her skills would be far broader by now. I'm confident she's grown through her own effort, and it's our responsibility to support that growth. Glad to hear that, Asuma smiled. I'm really starting to appreciate the chemistry of my team. It'd be a shame to disrupt that based on speculation. See you later, old man. With that, Asuma gave a relaxed wave and disappeared using the body flicker technique, leaving Hiruzen alone to reflect. He looked once more at Naruko's shinobi record. If Naruko displayed even half as much aptitude in ninjutsu as she did in taijutsu, she would easily be considered a rising star, perhaps even a prodigy, much like Sasuke Uchiha, who had also graduated with honors. The entire new generation was promising, but Naruko stood out. Without clan support or formal mentoring, she had developed into a capable shinobi through determination alone. Sasuke might currently have the edge in ninjutsu, thanks to the fire techniques taught by his family, but that would soon change. Hiruzen had no doubt, once Naruko began mastering her wind affinity, she would quickly catch up. The next day. The team began their day with a familiar routine, early morning drills, followed by sparring sessions. After about 2 hours, Asuma gathered his Jinan students together. All right, team. We're heading to the Hokage's office for a mission today. But before that, I want to follow up on yesterday's discussion, he said. Turning to Shikamaru first, he continued, since you're interested in learning genjutsu, I reached out to another jonin who specializes in that field. For now, she recommends starting with the theory and chakra control basics. He handed Shikamaru a scroll. Inside, you'll find detailed notes and exercises to help improve your chakra control. You'll need it if you want to master illusions. Shikamaru let out a groan. Is it too late to change my mind? This already sounds like a lot of work. Naruko couldn't help but laugh softly at that. She remembered how long it had taken her to understand genjutsu principles herself. It had taken real focus and practice. Next, Naruko, Asuma said, turning to the blonde girl. You're interested in wind manipulation, so like Shikamaru, you'll begin with the theory. We'll move on to the practical exercises later. Mastery takes time, but there's no rush. Naruko nodded with a determined smile and took the scroll from her sensei. She immediately began reading, so focused that she barely noticed the world around her as they walked. And Hinata, Asuma said, we'll stop by the weapons store before the mission. I think it's time you started practicing with a bow and arrows. With their objectives clear, the team headed out. As they walked through the village, Asuma spotted another Jonin approaching from the other direction, just as absorbed in his book as Naruko was in her scroll. "Morning, Kakashi," Asuma greeted casually. The silver-haired Jonin gave a distracted wave without looking up from his book, but paused when Naruko bumped into him gently. Looking down, Kakashi was met with a pair of bright blue eyes and an apologetic smile. "Oops. Sorry about that, sir," Naruko said politely. "I got a little too caught up in reading." Kakashi gave a warm smile in return. Though their interactions had been few, he had always kept an eye on Naruko from a distance. From what Asuma had told him recently, she was growing into an impressive young kunoichi. "I remember what we talked about," Kakashi said to Asuma. "Let's talk more about it later. For now, I need to meet my team." As Kakashi left, Shikamaru noticed how his gaze had lingered on Naruko for a moment. "What was that about?" Shikamaru asked curiously. "Oh, just a friendly wager between Jonin," Asuma replied with a laugh. "Now let's keep moving." The group entered the weapon shop, where Hinata worked with Asuma and the vendor to choose a suitable training bow and arrows. Shikamaru quickly found a chair and sat down, while Naruko wandered among the shelves. Naruko preferred to shop in disguise most of the time. When she entered shops in her regular appearance, vendors sometimes treated her differently. But today, she didn't mind. She was focused on her training, and nothing was going to distract her. With their errands complete, Team 10 set off toward the Hokage Tower, ready for their next mission, each of them taking their first steps into new areas of growth. The Hokage had personally decided to join the Chunin mission assignment board on this particular day. While not required of him, he often made these appearances to stay connected with the shinobi under his leadership. That morning, several Junon teams had already stopped by to receive their assignments. However, the younger rookie teams had yet to arrive. The Hokage anticipated that Kakashi's team would be the last to report in, though Asuma's and Kurenai's teams typically showed up earlier. He smiled upon hearing the sound of approaching footsteps. It appeared that Asuma's team would be the first to arrive today. The young Junon entered the room with Asuma following close behind. They lined up respectfully before the Hokage. "Team 10 reporting for duty," Asuma announced proudly. The Hokage nodded. "Ah, I was beginning to wonder when you'd appear, Asuma-kun. Your team is usually one of the earlier ones. Very well. Team 10, we have a range of D-ranked missions available today for you to select from." At this point, Naruko subtly turned her attention away. She had no interest in hearing about these mundane assignments. Although she had trained extensively under the guidance of the second Hokage's teachings, opportunities to truly test her capabilities were few and far between. While training alongside her teammates was productive, the challenges simply didn't push her enough. What Naruko sought more than anything was real-world experience to help her grow. She was brought back to the present when Asuma mentioned the 2D-ranked missions he had chosen for the team. "Oh, and by the way," Asuma added before they could leave, "I believe my team is ready to take on a C-ranked mission." This surprised his team, Naruko included. Iruka, who had remained nearby, looked slightly concerned. "Do you believe they're ready already?" Well, perhaps we can evaluate the possibility tomorrow," the Hokage said thoughtfully. Asuma nodded and led his team out, leaving the Hokage with two of his trusted Chunin advisors. "Hokage-sama," one of them asked, "do you really think it's wise to assign them to C-ranked missions so soon? They only graduated from the academy last month." The Hokage smiled at the concern. "It's true that they're still gaining experience, but these three have demonstrated exceptional talent. Shikamaru has a sharp analytical mind, and Hinata is progressing well with her Byakugan. And lastly, Naruko Uzumaki may very well be the most naturally gifted Junon of her generation. According to my son's reports, Naruko scored remarkably across nearly every area for a new shinobi. Her discipline and skill are impressive. The only thing she lacks now is practical experience, which can only be developed by encountering real challenges." Iruka still appeared uneasy. "I know they're talented, but I worry it's still too soon." The Hokage gave him an understanding look. "That just shows how deeply you care for your students, Iruka. But now is the time for them to step beyond the village walls and begin learning from the world itself. And don't worry, I don't intend to send them without oversight. Team 10 has shown patience with D-ranked missions." Still, it was written all over Naruko's expression that she found the tasks beneath her abilities. Other teams, I suspect, will soon voice their own frustration. Iruka sighed, sensing the truth in those words. He could already imagine Kiba making a scene, and Sasuke pushing for more serious assignments. "You're sending two teams together then?" he asked. The Hokage nodded, pleased by Irika's insight. Yes. Though I'll consult Kakashi before finalizing anything. Kurenai is more cautious, understandably so as a new Jonin. Kakashi has spoken to me about prioritizing hands-on experience for his team. I may not fully agree with his approach, but it has yielded good results. If memory serves, the fourth Hokage used a similar method. The next day. As expected, the next morning found both teams assembled in front of the Hokage at the mission office. Well, the Hokage began, since both Asuma and Kakashi believe their teams are prepared for a C-ranked mission, I've decided to approve their recommendation. Each team responded in their own way. Kiba exchanged a determined glance with Sasuke. Sakura, although clearly nervous, tried to conceal it as she instinctively stood a bit closer to Sasuke. Naruko noticed this with a subtle expression of annoyance but said nothing. Shikamaru sighed in his usual laid-back fashion, while Hinata looked uncertain. She quickly smiled, however, when Naruko gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Though Hinata had grown more confident, it was clear her journey was still ongoing. After giving them a moment to absorb the news, the Hokage continued. Rather than assigning separate C-ranked missions, I've decided to send both teams on the same one. Before he could explain further, Kiba interrupted. Wait a second. We don't need them. They're just going to hold us back. He trailed off quickly when the Hokage gave him a firm look and let a faint pulse of chakra fill the room. Kakashi gave a weary sigh and apologized for his student's behavior, lightly knocking Kiba on the head as a reminder of proper decorum. Naruko remained silent, quietly impressed by the Hokage's swift and calm handling of the disruption. It reminded her of the second Hokage's straightforward methods during her training, though his were often more intense. Naruko still vividly remembered a lesson where she learned the importance of respecting authority through a more dramatic example. Now, as I was saying, the Hokage resumed, this C-ranked mission involves escorting a civilian safely to the Wave Country. The client will need protection from potential thieves along the way. Kazuna-san, please come in. A man entered the room, older and carrying an air of exhaustion. Kazuna wore practical clothing and a pointed hat, with a towel around his neck and a small canteen in hand. Kiba made a face at the strong scent coming from him, clearly unaccustomed to such encounters. Kazuna gave the two teams a long, skeptical look before speaking. Hokage-sama, is this some kind of joke? I hired professional shinobi, not children. Especially that small blonde girl over there. You can't seriously expect me to believe she's a real ninja. Naruko heard a quiet chuckle, probably from Kiba, and felt the familiar sting of being underestimated. She could have proven herself with advanced techniques, but chose instead a more subtle approach. With a swift movement, barely noticeable to those not paying close attention, she flicked a kunai toward the canteen in Kazuna's hand. The blade pierced cleanly through it, spilling its contents harmlessly to the floor. Kazuna stared in shock, and Kiba jumped back as the kunai had come uncomfortably close to him. Sasuke looked at Naruko with new curiosity, while Shikamaru simply sighed, and Hinata covered her mouth in surprise. Naruko calmly stepped forward. Whether you believe I'm a shinobi or not doesn't change the fact that I am capable of keeping you safe. Asuma scratched his head awkwardly. Naruko, remember, we don't show off in front of clients like that. Still, he couldn't help but be impressed. Kakashi and the Hokage exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the skill she had just demonstrated. Naruko offered a small bow toward the client. My apologies, Kazuna-san. I only meant to reassure you that you're in safe hands. Kazuna, looking somewhat humbled, nodded. The Hokage cleared his throat and brought the focus back. As I was saying, this is a C-ranked escort mission. You will protect Kazuna during his return journey to the Wave Country. The mission begins tomorrow. You are all dismissed. As the teams filed out, the Hokage watched Naruko with thoughtful eyes. Her performance today had left an impression, and he could see that her dedication to training had paid off. He quietly activated his observation sphere, eager to monitor what would happen on this important mission. Everyone found it a bit curious when, after leaving the Hokage's office, the Jounin leaders guided both teams toward a quieter training ground on the outskirts of the village. Once they arrived, Asuma stepped forward to explain, as Kakashi casually leaned against a tree, his usual relaxed demeanor present. Alright, I'm sure you're all wondering why Kakashi and I brought the two teams together today, Asuma began with a calm but firm voice. Tomorrow, you'll be working together on a C-ranked mission. What's different this time is that you'll be partnering with someone outside your usual team. Missions won't always be limited to your squad, so today is about learning to cooperate beyond your familiar teammates. We'll begin with individual sparring and later move on to team-based exercises. He ignored Shikamaru's quiet sigh of complaint and Kiba's overly confident grin. We'll begin with individual matches. Hinata, you're up first, your opponent is Sakura. After that, it will be Shikamaru versus Kiba, and finally, Naruko against Sasuke. Kakashi and I will supervise the matches to ensure everyone stays safe. We have a mission tomorrow, so pace yourselves. As Hinata and Sakura stepped into the center of the field, the others respectfully stepped back to give them space. Sasuke, however, kept glancing toward Naruko, intrigued by her quiet composure. All right, Hinata and Sakura. Are you both ready? Asuma confirmed, signaling the start of the match. Sakura initiated the spar confidently, recalling how reserved Hinata had been back at the academy. She believed she had an opportunity to show how much she had grown. But while Hinata preferred a defensive approach, her skills in hand-to-hand combat were nothing short of impressive. Sakura attempted to surprise her with a sidestep maneuver, but Hinata's calm focus allowed her to dodge effortlessly and counter by gently tapping a key point on Sakura's side. Sakura felt her chakra momentarily stall, making it difficult for her to use the techniques she had practiced. A follow-up move from Hinata gently tapped her abdomen, ending the spar. "Hey, are you all right, Sakura?" Hinata asked sincerely, immediately helping her teammate up. Sakura smiled through the strain. "Wow. You're really strong, Hinata." Hinata blushed, clearly touched by the kind words. Naruko, observing from the side, appeared slightly disappointed in Sakura's effort, perhaps expecting more development after a month of training. "All right, it's my turn. Get ready, Shikamaru," Kiba said with a smirk, stepping forward with enthusiasm. Shikamaru, ever unenthused, lazily pulled out a kunai and waited. Naruko couldn't help but chuckle softly at Kiba's overconfidence. Even Kakashi, without looking up from his book, seemed quietly amused. Asuma gave the cue, and the match began. Kiba charged forward, only to freeze completely mid-step. His eyes widened. Even his companion Akamaru was unable to move. Shikamaru sighed, clearly not surprised. "What did you do?" Kiba asked, confused. Shikamaru gestured downward. "Look at your shadow." Kiba looked and saw that his shadow was directly connected to Shikamaru's. Before he could react, Shikamaru calmly extended his kunai holding hand, forcing Kiba to mimic the motion with his empty hand. A few paces forward, and Shikamaru halted just short of touching Kiba with the blade. The match was over. Kakashi spoke up. The Nara clan specializes in manipulating shadows to immobilize opponents. It's a technique that's especially useful in team battles. Kiba groaned in frustration but accepted the outcome. With the first two matches done, Naruko and Sasuke stepped forward. The rest of the group gave them space. In the minds of some, like Sakura and Kiba, Sasuke would clearly win. He had graduated at the top of the class, while Naruko's performance had seemed average. However, Hinata and Shikamaru weren't so quick to judge, suspecting that Naruko may not have shown her full potential back at the academy. Meanwhile, the two Jounin instructors exchanged quiet glances. Though they had told the students these matches were for team bonding, the truth was that this final match was also part of a personal wager between them, to see who was truly the most promising Jounin this year. Sasuke looked at Naruko, remembering how quickly she had reacted at the Hokage's office. He felt a growing sense of anticipation. Unlike most, he saw something in Naruko's movements, something sharp, something refined. Naruko, in turn, recalled the insights she had received about the Uchiha clan, their precision, their ability to read opponents, and their disciplined way of thinking. Even without the Sharingan, they were excellent at adapting mid-battle. She saw this as a great chance to improve. Asuma signaled the start, and Naruko moved first, launching a set of shuriken with surprising speed. Sasuke instinctively dodged and advanced quickly, aiming a precise strike. Naruko deflected the attack with graceful control and countered with a sidekick, which Sasuke narrowly avoided. Sasuke responded by throwing a few shuriken of his own, and one appeared to connect, only for Naruko to vanish in a puff of smoke, revealing a substitution technique. The real Naruko emerged behind him, accompanied by several shadow clones. Sasuke dispersed the clones with quick throws, but the real Naruko landed a strong punch that knocked the wind out of him. Sasuke had to retreat a few steps, catching his breath. The two then engaged in a fast-paced taijutsu exchange. Neither held a clear upper hand, and their movements exceeded the expectations for Jounin. The others were astonished. Kiba was speechless, and Sakura couldn't even follow the motions anymore. Indeed, Naruko is quite talented, Just as you said, Asuma noted, lighting a cigarette with a small smile. Sasuke's excellent as well, Kakashi added. But Naruko has full control over her chakra. Interestingly, she's not even using that advantage fully yet. Back in the match, Sasuke realized that Naruko's speed and strength were increasing. He pushed more chakra into his own limbs to keep up, but Naruko seemed barely affected. What caught him off guard the most, though, was her expression. She was completely focused, her eyes never wavering, her movement deliberate and composed. A high-speed kick came in from Naruko, and Sasuke had no choice but to block. The force was intense. Naruko quickly followed up and maneuvered to Sasuke's side, stopping her training blade just inches from him. She had won the spar, fair and square. It was clear to Asuma and Kakashi, Naruko had displayed remarkable control and discipline. The others stood silently, impressed. Congratulations, Sasuke. Looks like something awakened, Naruko said kindly, lowering her training blade. Sasuke blinked, confused. She held up the blade as if it were a mirror, and he saw his reflection. His eyes had changed. His Sharingan had activated for the first time. One match with Naruko, and Sasuke had unlocked a new level of awareness. Though he hadn't used any ninjutsu during the fight, he understood now, Naruko was not someone to be underestimated. She had become a true rival, and perhaps someone who would push him to grow stronger than ever before. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for watching. With gratitude. 6 Path Weeb.